Welcome back, or welcome to the As Above, So Below podcast. As you're tuning in today, I imagine you're asking yourself, why? Why am I listening to this? Why do I listen to podcasts? Why am I interested in long form conversations? And why does that work for me? Our topic will hopefully give you some structure to those questions so you can proceed forward with your life. Andrew and I love making these podcasts because it's a way that we can give ourselves a why and at the same time build it as we go. And what we really want to get into today is digging into work, or digging into the work, which is yours to interpret. What's the work that you need to do? What's the work that is yours to do? And why is that important to us? So as I start our podcast here today, I'm going to throw it over to Andrew. Andrew, why is work important to you?
Work is important to me because it gives me a direction towards my goals. It gives me a focus for something to work towards that's worthwhile. And like you hinted in the introduction, working towards something that's worthwhile, it takes asking yourself why. Why are these things important? And doing the work, digging into the work of understanding why it's important, having that purpose around what you're doing. It makes me want to create some framework around what it really means to dig into the work. And like I just said, to dig into the work, first you have a goal or an intention, some objective that you're looking to accomplish, and that is developed with your why. You have your why, and then from there you're able to create clarity around what it is that you're going to be doing, the goal, the intention. Then from there we have the second part, which is digging into the work. This is where we take action, we implement. We could, there's a lot of different synonyms for this, but diving into the process or making a commitment. And when we are taking action or we're digging into the work, we are in a state that is creative and productive. Ultimately coming back to like the helping us move closer towards that objective we have for ourselves. So that's why digging into the work is important and how I look at it through my lens.
I love it. So one thing I'm picturing then is you can have a why, and that can direct what you work on and how you work. What about the second part of whys? What if you don't have one? What are your thoughts on, all right, I'm working, but I'm not really sure why. Where would you go, or where have you gone to understand your why and putting in work up front to get to a place where you understand your why?
Determining your why, it's a personal process. It's something only you can answer for yourself. A lot of times I imagine people are doing something particular, they're taking some type of action, although they're missing that why, they're missing that deeper purpose. And how that shows up is when they're in the process of doing their work, there might be certain things that we're going to talk about today that they may come short on, or they are not putting their best work out or doing something to the best of their ability because the why is not strong. So when I'm thinking about why I'm doing something, or I come back to a major motivation for doing something, understanding that why comes back to understanding myself, understanding what it is that I enjoy, what it is that the things that I like doing. And ultimately, I've hinted at this in previous podcasts before, and especially podcasts 11, where we talk about our goals for the upcoming year. When I'm in a creative state, or I'm in a digging into the work, I have a strong why, and a lot of that comes from enjoying the process of creating, right? And understanding, like, when I'm putting in the work, I'm digging into the work and I'm creating, I'm most happy. And it's even better when I can dig into the work, create something, and it's something not only that I can enjoy, but other people can enjoy as well, and they can take value from. So that when I'm thinking back to my why and when I want to do something, those are all the thoughts that precede me actually digging into the work and getting to that point.
Again, good points. For me, there have been moments in my life, my process, if you will, where the why that I was operating under changed, or no longer had relevance to what was important to me. So when I think of the why that we're using to direct our work, the why has a lot to do with our value system and what we find valuable. So understanding those two things, like for me as a coach, I want to create a phenomenal life through fitness and mindset coaching for every person that I get the opportunity to work with. That's my purpose, and I understand that. However, having a purpose is one thing. Acting within those values that resonate with my purpose make it so much better when I'm there. So if I'm just saying these things sound good and I don't fully believe them, then my why is different than my values and my purpose. So having those aligning of, all right, I value health and longevity and going after goals for my clients and doing it in a way that's personable, that is taking into account where they are in their life at the moment, that then gives me purpose to create better programs, to listen more deeply, to ask better questions, see how we can flesh out these whys for other people. So in this idea, right, we're digging into the work in this episode. This can be a very big, heady type of conversation, right? It can all be theoretical, if you will. However, I want to think about what are the things that you and I are doing that we see value in and that we are continuing to put work in to create that value for others. So with that in mind, I'll give one example, and then I want to kind of ping pong back and forth here, or table tennis, just tap back and forth. So for me, one thing that I see to be most valuable is creating a third space, a place for someone to go that they feel comfortable expressing what they are experiencing, that is non-judgmental and is fully present in the moment. So I see value in that thing. How do I create that value in my coaching practice? Takes work. That's where we start digging into the work. I see the value there. And now how do I create that? Is one, I set up my schedule to have buffer time for every call. So if I'm on a call with someone and they need more than an hour, or maybe it's a half-hour session and they're going to need more than that, I'm picturing myself in the end of the call having delivered such value to my client that then they can go and live their life. And that's coming back to my purpose. That's coming back to my why. Right? How do I set up my coaching experience to help someone else? So in that, we have values. My purpose is to be there and be mindful, be present and non-judgmental. I'm curious, Andrew, in your life, where do you see value and what you do as valuable, and how are you creating that value?
Thanks for sharing that, Gunnar. That was really insightful, and I imagine very helpful for the listeners as far as having some context or understanding what that looks like. For me, in my life, something that I value a lot is health. Health is important. That's a very broad topic. You have mental health, physical health. There's lots of different areas where you could dive into, but specifically physical health is something that I value a lot, and I know you do as well, because when we are physically feeling our best, that as above, so below, as above, it can help our mind and how we think and how we interact in the world. So having said that, my physical health is a huge is something I really value. How I share that value with others and create an experience with others is through my work, what I do here as a coach, helping my clients understand their bodies better physically so they can navigate the world better and do whatever it is that they want to do to their best and to their safest abilities. So that's a big part of my reason why. And I think it's important that people take self-responsibility for their health. Who'd have thought that, right? Self-responsibility for your health, right? You got to take you're in charge of that, right? So coming back to something that is me digging into the process based off of those values and how I create that experience for my clients is developing my skills as a coach around coaching movement and assessing movement. And that's something I'm actively working on at this moment. Always working on sharpening my tools as a coach and being able to bring more value for my clients and be as effective and efficient as possible as I can when I'm in that process of delivering that to them. And that right now currently looks like me getting some new credentials on assessing mobility at a deeper level than I was before, so I can make more specific recommendations on how to improve mobility so my clients can perform better in everyday life or whatever sport it is that they want to do. How that looks when I'm digging into the work, it's me studying material. It's me practicing assessments on as many people as possible, whether they be clients or friends or family, because I know when I put in the reps and I get the work in, I get better. And that translates into me delivering more value into my client experience. As well as digging into the work looks like it's a critical thinking process for me as well. It's a critical thinking process because, okay, I have this assessment. I now take in this new information. What do I do with that information? How do I create an intervention that is going to improve my client's state of well-being in regards to their mobility and their physical health? And then from a business standpoint, I offer programs for my clients to do when they commit to coaching with me. And there's a critical thinking process where I'm thinking about how I can best deliver that experience into the program that I create for my clients. So all those things are what it looks like for me to dig into the work in one aspect of my life. And that's something I really enjoy. I've mentioned in previous podcasts and earlier in this podcast, digging into the work, it's a creative process. I get to create this experience for my clients. I get to create this knowledge base for myself by studying and attending workshops that allow me to progress and advance as a coach. And these are all things that I love and enjoy doing. And, I'm fortunate too that not only do I get to help my clients' state of being, is that all this knowledge, it comes back and allows me to take care of my state of being even better as well. So that's one example of digging into the work in my life. And yeah, I love it. It's fun. I wake up in the morning and I just go right into it.
Excellent. That brings another thought to my head is, am I doing something that is valuable to myself? And over time, like you touched on, which we've communicated in different episodes as well, is in order to be confident in anything, you have to do the reps.
Mm-hmm.
And we can change that phrasing to, I get to do the reps so I can be confident.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence can look like trusting your body to go surfing. Confidence can be, I can take out the trash because I am physically strong. I can do all of these little things in my life because I've put work in on things that I value. So going back to yours, which is health, right? For me, it's creating a space that is going to allow someone to express things that potentially need to be expressed for them to feel healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the overarching thing, right? And all these come back to the goal of this podcast, which is how can we be more self-responsible through these different paths and thoughts. So with that, as we are digging into the work, one thing that comes to my mind often is ownership. Am I the owner of my work? Am I owning what I've done and what I've said? How does that look in terms of being a coach first for you? How does it look to be an owner of what you put out? And then what does it also mean for you to own your own practices for your own health?
Yeah, that's a big question, but the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of ownership and how you were phrasing it there is like ownership relates back to your identity and how you perceive yourself and your ability to do the thing, right? And the more ownership we have over our life, the more we identify ourselves as the creators in the story of our lives. So having that ownership is an integral frame of mind to have because it puts us into that seat of empowerment and allows us to realize that we are in control of our lives and we can dig into the work to create the outcome that we want to have for ourselves. How that shows up in my life, it shows up as, you know, in my business, of course, like as a big one. My name is on the sign in the front of the building. It's, you know, very much so part of my identity to be this person who provides this type of value for people as far as helping them understand their bodies better and take more responsibility for themselves. Yeah, like that identity is really, and like then owning that identity by living into this role that I've created for myself and having that alignment there really facilitates the process of digging into the work. I forgot what exactly you asked me at the beginning of that question. It was a loaded question there, but I imagine that answers it.
Yeah, you answered the second part very nicely, and I see it fitting into the first part, which was how do you take ownership as business? And the second part is you're doing the things that you would do for yourself and then magnifying them for other people. Like, all right, how can then I create this? If we can use the term art, right? Health can be an art that we are creating. There's infinite ways to health that we can practice. Everyone starts in a unique place. And for me, I think that's exactly where we should talk about ownership is I am here. I've been in these other experiences. I've been in these different relationships, different coaching situations, whatever it's in. I want to own all of those experiences because that's who I am today. And with those pieces of knowledge and past moments, I can then move forward and get into more work. Right. So the idea of ownership for you is, all right, I'm doing all these little things to improve my business because my business is part of my identity. But you are also living out the things that you want to teach in your business. So there's a two-way correspondence or polarity, if you will, to that. Like if you're doing it on one end, you're going to help someone else do it on the other end, and they come back and forth. So
I imagine the same thing rings true to you in your coaching process as well. You've experienced how developing your mental skills has allowed you to really progress. I imagine in life and in sport as well. It's something that you've done, and you are able to share through your experiences and your wisdom that you've gained through that process with them, and meet them at where they're at in their journey. You're kind of just like a little bit further down the road where they're at, where it's like, okay, I've been here. I know what it's like. Let me help you take those next steps. And I imagine, just kind of like on a side note here, being coaches, being world-class coaches, it means that we are always in the state of development and growth, right? We're always working on progressing ourselves, whether it's the mental side of things or the physical side of things. And when you take that position on as a coach, it really allows you to see how you can best help people out. I imagine having that experience is what allows us to be great.
absolutely. This that comment there of my experience, then going into share with other people's experiences, reminds me of stress. And the reason it reminds me of stress is that as a coach, I can overthink, to go back to a previous episode, I can overthink what I need to do. And that can be stressful. When I can have a plan, I can have just general ideas of what I'm going to do. But then I can go into the session and meet that person where they are with what they're bringing. And that then gets into this idea of, am I practicing, or am I constantly trying to test the waters? Am I constantly trying to push the boundaries instead of being relaxed and letting things come to you, and then being able to make decisions by whether that's detaching or using your previous experience, previous knowledge to make those new decisions? Where this idea of stress comes into, especially when we're talking about work, is work can be very stressful, both physically and emotionally. Work can also be eustress, or positive stress on us, if it fits in those values that we've been discussing and our purpose is understood. In your personal process, Andrew, what kind of stress do you pick out that allows you to get into the work?
What kind of stress do I pick out that allows me to get into the work?
Yeah. So if you're experiencing stress, what is the type of stress that allows you to do the work that you value the most?
Gotcha. Well, the type of stress, of course, I want to be operating in the spectrum of stress. Like, I want to be operating in that eustress state, where the amount of stress that I'm taking on is enough for growth, but not so much that it causes distress. And we, are familiar with all the experiences and feelings of being stressed out, right? And so it comes back to like a harmony of how you're living your life. Something that I've worked on a lot the past few months is setting the intention of what harmony looks like for me, and then understanding and setting the boundaries and the frameworks for operating within that, right? And when I have the boundaries set up and I know what I'm working towards, it's allows me to define ways to get to those goals, to get to those objectives without overextending myself. It comes with that really good understanding of me, what it is, and knowing how like I best operate, that allows me to have this harmony in my life. And when I notice there's disharmony in how I'm living, as far as like the things I say yes to. It can feel overwhelming, and that's something I'm very familiar with. Is when the state of distress for me is typically a state of overwhelming. It's where I have not set proper boundaries around what it is that I'm creating or being intentional about. And I say yes to too many things. And because there's no boundaries there. And then because my tendency is to say yes, is that next thing I know, I'm in a state of being overwhelmed because those boundaries weren't set, because and I'm now no longer operating in this harmonious way. Things are, you could say, out of balance, right? So for me, that's, generally speaking, it's not a matter of like one specific area in my life, like business or relationships or physical fitness. There's always this like synergistic effect between all of these areas of my life, right? And sometimes more attention gets put into one versus the other. That's how harmony works. It's not this perfect balance thing where the amount of energy that I put into my physical health is exactly the same as the amount of energy I put into my personal relationships is the same exact amount of energy that I put into my business. Like that would be like balance there, right? Where in reality, there's like these little variances and throughout periods of time based off of what my intentions are, right? Coming back to the goals, understanding the reasons why. And I've noticed that when I have a strong why, I have a strong intention, I know what I'm doing, then the action steps, they really just present themselves. Then it's just a matter of, okay, I know these things, like how can I set myself up to be most successful in accomplishing these tasks? That's a big part of it there.
Beautiful. So as we are discussing, digging into the work, we're discussing how we balance stress, how we look at all of these different things we have going on in our life. I want to double tap on this and expand on one idea. Is stress is important because our body can adapt, and at the same time we can potentially not adapt and have issues. So within stress, there's also interest that comes with it. Am I doing something that's of interest to me? And is this something that I want to be doing? So where these pieces come together is this notion of being in flow or the flow state. And as we were preparing for this discussion, digging into the work, having values, understanding your why, all comes back to doing actual work. And how do we get into a flow, to use that term again? I personally believe being in a flow state requires having stress, or another way we can put it is a challenge that is adequate for us to partake in. So if I'm going to be in a flow state, one, there's got to be some level of stress or challenge. The second piece of flow state is I have to have interest in the task itself, right? If you were to ask me to go and sunbathe and get a tan, one, I'm slightly interested in having a nice tan, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot of stress or challenge to that. So I might be distracted the entire time I'm getting a tan. However, when we're going into things that matter to us, that have a level of interest that is relatively high compared to just laying down out in the sun, it's important to have that balance. But I want to be going into something that is exciting to me. I want to go into something that is energizing, and I can picture that on the back end. So for me, going into a coaching call, I am so excited because I know deep down I have something to offer that is going to change someone's life for maybe the few hours after the call, or maybe forever. And that level of interest gets me to the point of, all right, I'm going to take on some stress. I'm going to listen to some challenging things. I'm going to listen to some experiences that maybe I have not had, but I can relate to by listening. This is the third part of flow state that I haven't touched on yet. I believe when you have practiced something, whether once or 1,000 times, when you have practiced those actions, you can be in flow state because you no longer have to think about every minute detail of the work that you're doing, of the action that is needing to be done. So for instance, putting away the dishes. Okay. This could be something so simple. However, my challenge in my mind is I want to make these dishes look nice in the cabinet. So when I pull them out again, it's like, oh, that's refreshing. I value the order and cleanliness of putting dishes away. I see the stress in if the dishes are left out and undone, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be down on myself. I'm going to let that carry with me until I make a decision to go forward. My level of interest is I love food. So I want to have dishes that I can eat food off of that are clean. And I've done this over and over and over again that I no longer have to think about it. So putting away the dishes or doing the dishes is one way that I can get into flow state by doing something relatively simple that is work. To pass it to you, Andrew, what are your takes on flow state, and what are the things in your life or practices in your life that you can get into flow state currently?
So flow state, it comes in for me as similarly to you in cleaning. Doing the dishes could be one example. Just cleaning the house, vacuuming, sweeping, just doing things to tidy up. It is just a matter of just taking action, just doing it, right? And the next thing you know, you can enjoy that nice clean space that you've created for yourself. Something else I do when it comes to getting the flow is my morning routine around movement too. Something that I incorporate into my morning practice is just moving, right? And it could be doing some specific stretches, some specific ways of moving different joints in my body. The best way for me to get into that flow is just to start. And I always have one movement that I always start with whenever I begin that flow. I'll spill the beans. It's cat cows. I start moving my spine. Just feels so good. And when it's usually early in the morning and it might be a little bit cold, it's like something I can do that's not too complex, but I can still wear my big warm sweater on before I start to warm up, and then take that off. And it's like, okay, now I'm moving. And then it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, I start to move through my body, notice areas where I'm feeling stiff or tight. And okay, that's the next thing I'm going to go after. And then just kind of keep going. And I have a cycle where I'm a water with me too, sometimes coffee, but water with me. I'm sipping on that water in between every stretch or every movement that I do, just nourishing my body with that hydration as I'm going through that flow. And that's, to me, just digging into the work. And what I find is that when I'm first waking up, mentally, I want to just sit there and do nothing and enjoy the coziness that is when I just wake up. Although I know how much better I'll feel when I start moving and how helpful it is my routine. So that's another example of flow. Cooking as well. When I cook, I love starting in a clean kitchen, just like the counters cleared off, my ingredients are in one area, things are ready to go or ready to be prepped and whipped up. And then when I'm cooking, it's like the space is clean, I have everything I need, have all the tools I need, and it's just like, just go, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And the next thing you know, it's like an hour has gone by, have all this food made, and I've done so in a way where it was enjoyable, and I enjoyed the process. coming into the gym. I think I've shared this one before as well. I come into the gym and I'm getting ready to start my work day. My clients come in, opening up the door, turning on certain lights, putting on the air vents, going through this ritual that I have for myself, these habits that I have. And all of those habits and rituals start to get me into that flow state of like, okay, what's the program like for this client today? What did I plan out for them to do? Familiarize myself with that. How can I get the tools and the equipment we need ready for this process? So when they walk in the door, greet them, say hi, let's get to work. We have things planned out. Makes me think back to when I shared the story, like being down in Mexico, and it's like an overthinking conversation where it's like surfing. Like, what's the process that I do where I'm getting ready to surf? It's like waxing up the board, getting the wetsuit on, all these little things I have going on in my life where it really takes thinking out of it and just allows me to get into flow. So I see rituals and habits being a big part of getting into flow. For me, when I'm flowing, there's usually like a physical or a mental thing that I'm going after. So like, for example, when I was preparing for this podcast today, I was at the park here in San Diego. It's sunny out. It's a nice, beautiful view. I sat down. I had my intention of what I was going to be doing as I sat down. I had eaten a snack before, so my stomach was satisfied. I love just being outdoors and in the sun. When I'm outside, it's very easy for me to get to a flow state. A little coffee there I can sip on and enjoy. Something that I've taken away from one of our mentors is Mike Bledsoe. He uses binaural beats. So these you put them on in your headphones, and it's like this music that's very helpful in getting you into a mental state of focus and flow. So that's one of the hacks I do. I take, put do not disturb on my phone, so I'm not getting messaging or calls coming into me, so I can keep that focus. I usually take a few breaths. Take a big deep breath in, nice big long exhale. And when I have an intention for what I'm working on, I usually have an intention for the period of time I want to be working on it as well. So because when I get into flow, and so easy to stay in flow, when you have a schedule, you need to set a timer. So I set that timer. So if I'm flowing, I don't continue to flow and forget other responsibilities I may have coming on in the day. So there's a lot of intention around the time being spent on something like that too. So that was like literally my flow process in preparing for this podcast today. Call that meta flow right there. Yeah.
All right. Before we tip over into the metaverse, I want to pull out a few things that you were describing. So when we have habits that you use frequently, right? I want you to think back to the first time you opened up your gym to do a work day. What was the thought process like compared to what it is today? Right? What was that difference of, all right, the first time I'm doing it, you have a lot of things that you need to take in. And what does that look like now that you've practiced it many, many times?
I would say even further back than opening up my gym, I would say going back to training my first client ever. That would be more representative of the question that you're asking me here to where I'm at now. So when I think back to the first session I ever trained, I was at the first training job I had that was at a YMCA. I had a client coming in. I believe she purchased a 4-pack of training sessions with me. And I remember feeling like very like anxious and like nervous about the coaching, about the training session. I had prepared, I had written out a workout. And I just remember that whole experience being very clunky. Obviously that was the first of many reps to come. And just, from when I work work with a client, they come in, they may become there isn't a lot of rapport as well, because when I work with that client, the lead up process to the first actual training session is nothing like it is now, where when someone's coming in and they're doing the first training session with me, there's been, phone calls, there's been in-person consultations and assessment, maybe close to 2 hours worth of interaction before the first actual workout, because I take in so much information now from my clients before even starting the training program. It's like, we need to set this baseline. I need to know where you're at. Like, I want to understand their why, like where their motivation is, what about this is important to them. And that's just so different from that first time I trained that client. It was the first client I ever trained. It was like, I got on the phone with them. It's like, okay, cool, brief 1 minute conversation. You told me your name, a little bit about yourself. We scheduled a date and time, hang up, go to that session. Whereas now it's like the amount of time invested prior to even working with one client is so much greater, but it allows me to deliver on this experience that is night and day different from what that very first training session was like. So as I've evolved and grown, like these habits and these routines that I have leading into starting with a new client, and what that flow process looks like, it's just so different, and I've learned a lot more, and I've come to realize, like, you got to really set up yourself and the client for success in the coaching experience when you take time to ease into it and really, really understand what it is that they want and what it is that they need.
I love that. So as a coach, hearing your example, the actions that I would take are, I know what the outcome can be. And as a coach, a lot of times in the physical realm, it's physical health and strength. However, having those moments to interview your clients before you start working with them, really understand where they're coming from, what their past experiences are with fitness, that allows you to build a list of intentions. And when you have the list of intentions for a training program for an individual, it allows you to offload distractions, right? You can come into the work when you go into the space, you're not thinking about, what am I going to do today? Right? You've already had discussions of, this is how I want to go about things, and this is how this person is ready to receive training. Right? Training, I think, is a gift. When you get to work with a coach, it's such a privilege that you've put yourself in that position, which is ultimately an investment in yourself. So when you're working with someone like Andrew or myself, I want to have as much intention behind what we're doing that allows us to offload distractions, and we can make it a habit of getting the most out of, whether it's an hour physical training session, maybe it's an hour phone call to work on mindset and understanding stress better. All right, when we can offload these distractions, we can get to the work quicker, if you will, or we can get to the work more frequently, and we can make progress, which is the work. If we're gonna make a little, I don't even know the word right now, I'm forgetting, but if I have work in the process, they're the same thing. They're equivalent. The outcome and whatever comes from the work are different, right? I can understand, I want to lift this amount of weight at this date. That's an outcome. What am I doing right now to be focused on the present moment, building habits, offloading distractions, and creating the environment that's going to allow me to thrive towards those goals and intentions that maybe you set for yourself, or maybe you set with a coach, and now you have accountability on top of that. So when we have these lists of intentions, most likely there's a why involved to come back around. So when we have this why, whether we're starting with it super defined or we're deciding, hey, health is the outcome. Why is that important? Let's put work in. Let's see what it looks like to make changes to our lifestyle, what it looks like to make changes to our training or practice, if you will, training and practice being the same thing. Where this comes into, in my mind, is a recent story one of my clients was having around what I considered training. They did not make the distinction of testing themselves and training themselves. Just bear with me here for a second, Andrew. My client went into the gym with programs that I had written and wanted to max out every week whatever rep scheme I had put in there. So let's say we're going to do 3 squats today. And even though I wrote a percentage, they're like, hey, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to disregard that really intentional note that Gunnar wrote. And I want to see what I can do for 3 reps, because if I can hit my 3 rep today, I'm doing the right thing. However, that is testing our abilities rather than training our practices and training our habits in the physical realm. And at the same time, if you're always thinking, I need to be at the peak shape, I need to be at the top, we can run into problems of overtraining or chronically testing ourselves instead of giving our body and our mind time to adapt to stresses, right? To go back to stress. If the stress is too high, it's really difficult to enjoy training because we can't get into flow state. So have you ever experienced a time where you wanted to just keep testing and testing and testing yourself when it should have been training or practice to develop those habits, develop those skills in the process in the meantime?
I think back to my early weightlifting days as a, in a very similar example that you just gave, where I want to think of other areas of my life that are examples of that too. I would say, like, relating back to my previous example, like time and what I said yes to, in a way, relating it to what you're saying is that, like, saying yes to everything is kind of like testing out new experiences rather than only saying yes to things that I know are in alignment with my intentions and my goals at the time. I imagine, I know because I'm a naturally curious person and I love exploring opportunities and adventuring. It's fun to say yes. There's novelty around saying yes to new things. Although when you say yes to one thing, it may limit the time that you have around focusing on doing the thing that you said you were going to do, or the thing that you were intentional about, or the goal that you're working towards, right? And so that kind of like is similar in the sense where instead of just training and sticking to the process of what I originally intended to do, the shiny light or drew me in the opposite direction, away from the thing I intended to do, and I wanted to try the new thing or do the new thing as opposed to the thing that I said I was going to do. And that's something I've practiced a lot on. One of my for me, how, like, the story that relates to that is one of the ancient story of Odysseus traveling throughout the world on the adventures. I forget exactly the I think that's what it's called, Odysseus, right?
Odysseus is the character. It's the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, yes, sorry. Odyssey. And when he is going through, like, the strait And there's the sirens, which are like the mermaids that call off to the sailors in the ship. And I want to distract them, so they crash the ships into the rocks, right? But instead, what they do is they strap themselves to the mast. They put all this wax in their ears. And so they just continue to stay the course. They don't get distracted by the sirens, the luring sounds of the sirens wanting to draw them into the rocks, right? So for me, that's like what the story that I think of when I refer to like the shiny object type syndrome. It's like easy to get distracted and pulled, or something I noticed about myself is that it was easy at one point to get distracted and pulled into different directions from things I committed to. And how when I have practiced and become better at sticking to things I've committed to, it's ultimately yielded me having accomplished more and being more satisfied with the work that I have done, as opposed to going out and testing a new experience rather than sticking to what I've committed to. One of my friends, I imagine we may interview him one day. He told me about this, and he studied psychology, and he said that there's a term for this. It's called constitutional commitment. And ever since then, it's really been ingrained in my mind. Like having this constitutional commitment to something means strapping yourself to the mast and seeing it through. And that's something in my life, or that relates back to digging into the work. It's like committing to this thing that I said I was going to do, digging into the work, seeing it through. That's how I see that showing up in my life. And when I think back to the things where I've stuck it through and I've stayed on the course to what I committed to, it's always yielded like the best results, like hands down. It's playing the long game. It's sticking the course. And usually when you play the long game, that's when you get the exponential returns or the best returns, right? Rather than zigzagging around all over the place. I mean, for me, opening up my studio, my gym, that was a commitment as a process. It's something that took a couple of years of thought and intention around, and ultimately seizing upon the opportunity that presented itself. And that's a big part of what's got me to where I'm at today. I remind myself of that story because prior to that, the experiences that Andrew had when he was younger, they were, it's like I said, shiny object syndrome. Go to this thing, go to that thing, rather than just staying the course, sticking to my commitments and seeing things through, rather than, testing and trying to chase a result, just sticking to the process. Is there like a time in your life where you might have had a similar experience, or, to relate back to your question, where you wanted to test as opposed to stick to the process?
Yes. However, for me, it comes in a different order. From the very beginning of my competitive CrossFit career, I valued moving as well as possible at all times as the highest thing for me. So my value was, I'm going to be the best mover. I'm going to leave zero doubt that I did the rep and did the work that someone saw. And just recently, as I'm learning more about how to compete and be an even better competitor. So this is essentially 8 years in the process of, I'm always going to move well. I'm always going to train to my highest quality. And that's the standard I want to set for myself. And what that has led me to is the testing portion. I'm getting in my own way. So what I mean to say there is I'm constantly in the work itself on training and getting stronger and knowing that there's a long-term vision. However, the goals that I have set, if I'm going to meet them, I need to learn how to test myself. I need to learn how to perform in those opportunities of testing myself. So in that sense, is my mind was always distracted on, I'm going to be the best mover I can possibly be. However, if I'm going to reach my goals of being a champion and winning, there's going to be a moment and several moments along the path that when I test myself, I need to go to the absolute edge, if not past the edge, because that's the only way I can expand that experience. And then I can come back and reflect into my training and into my practice of how can I get better at that? I believe I don't have to touch that, to use a TV show title. I don't have to touch my enemy every single day. However, I need to understand what it feels like to go to that place. And if that means I need to train going to that place, that's perfect. I'm going to test myself more often while knowing that it's in the context of my training and keeping my practice what I value the most.
Yeah. It sounds like you have this very strong distinction between training and testing still, although what it sounds like is that you come to learn that you need to spend more time in that testing phase, or like get more reps in testing, not at the detriment of your overall performance, but just to the point where you can have more experience in those higher states of competition.
Exactly. And to use the reference of my client in the discussion I had with her is, if I'm always testing, there's no space to train and allow myself to adapt. However, if I'm always training, I won't have the experience of what it feels like to test myself.
Yeah.
So the balance there comes from understanding the distinction of the two. And they're both types of work, which is what we're getting into today, right? We're digging into the work. My why in training is to move as best as I can, so I'm healthy and I can do this for a long time. I also have to understand, if my goal is to win, my why in testing is I'm going to give everything I have, even if it means crashing and burning.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you notice like an optimum ratio of, like, say, testing to training? Because what I think of when you just shared that was like analysis paralysis versus taking action, right? Being like kind of a similar concept, but like a lot of times people spend all this time in analysis paralysis. They need to create this perfect plan before they take action, right? The planning being the process, the taking action being the testing. I'm curious, like, for what you just explained there, is there like a ratio or an optimum balance between the two that maybe is more quantitative?
I don't have an answer for what the perfect ratio of testing versus training is. However, I believe if there's an upcoming event that you're going to compete in, which a competition is a test, you are going to do more reps of testing or similar to testing closer to that main event or seminal event, right? So there are periods of time in my year where competitions are a few months out, or the competition season is a few months out. And most of the reps at that time of the year are training and practice and building tissue strength, building movement quality. All of those things are important. If I've been true to myself and done that work, it's therefore easier, closer to competition, to start testing. I see the distinction as, we need to know what it feels like to test. We need to know what it feels like to train. If you want to be good on the test, practice like you're going to test. Yeah. And that's closer to the event itself. Yeah. Without having any explicit percentages or numbers, That's how I view it.
Okay, interesting. Is that there's it's like it can be a sliding scale depending on where you're at in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And to continue on the importance of having a coach that can help you discern when it's time to test and when it's time to train is invaluable. And this goes for, back squatting as an example. This also goes for if you're a sport athlete. Are you always testing yourself, and is that burning you out before the actual game? Having a coach there, a third party, that's what I see my work as with youth athletes, college athletes. When I work with them, is all right, you get to test. You love to go to the game. You love to test. How are we showing up in practice and outside of the game to allow ourselves to be ready to test? I think that's a valuable thing as well when understanding what the work is.
Definitely. Yeah, some really solid thoughts there. I'm curious, like, as far as some concluding statements and ideas on what it is to dig into the work. Do you have anything that you'd like to summarize or kind of end this call with in regards to that?
So when I picture myself digging into the work, I am confident when I have a why, because I'm going to do the reps that support why I'm doing it. And at the same time, if you're going to work on something, whether that's yourself, maybe it's a project for your work, physical training, if you don't know your why completely, that's okay. As you continue to develop skills and understand if this is the right thing for me to be doing, you can build your why as you go. With that, we have a why that we can start with, or we can build it as we go. I highly recommend understanding what you value about what you're doing. So that's a different question. What do you value versus why you're doing it? And when we have the ability to see those two things, it's easier to get into flow state. We can better address the stress and challenges that we're going into. You're most likely more interested or have a higher level of interest in the tasks that you're partaking in. And then over time, you're going to practice things and the flow state will be easier. And those can become habits. Imagine yourself in flow state all the time, because your habits support the challenges, the practices, and the level of interest that you have for something will get you so far into anything that you value.
Well said there. Like ultimately digging into the process, getting into this work where it allows us to feel, experience creativity. Ultimately, I think you said this in so many words, but allows us to feel ownership in our life, allows us to feel like we're in control of our own destiny, we're the captains of our own ship. And ultimately, like, that's what it all comes back to. It's like that self-responsibility there. When we dig into the work and we have our whys, or we're figuring out our whys, we're inching and we're moving closer towards that state of completion, really, and getting closer towards what we want in life. So,
excellent.
Yeah. Anything left to add?
I want to thank everyone listening to the As Above, So Below podcast. If you have not already, subscribe to our channel on Spotify and YouTube, like and comment. If you would be so gracious to leave a review on either of those platforms for us, please know that goes a long way and makes us even more excited to see those things, because we genuinely love talking about these concepts and relating to self-responsibility. We hope you get a lot out of these conversations as well, and that you can take into your own life and dig into the work. Andrew, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Swasey_fitness. You can also find me on my business page if you're in the San Diego area and you're looking to work on your movement and your strength. That's Swasey Fitness Personal Training. Yeah, those are the areas. How about you, Gunnar?
Yeah, if you're looking to work on your mental skills, whether that's for sport competition or life, I am at Gunnar Regan on Instagram. My coaching Instagram is at Animus Coach, ANIMUS Coach. Please reach out if you're looking to develop your mental skills and get better at getting into the work as we just discussed. So thank you all for listening. We truly appreciate you once again. We will catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Adios.